We're going to be talking about some studio growth essentials, just some really, I think, core information, things that I think every studio needs in order to thrive. And then we'll talk about some summer retention strategies too, which I'm looking forward to. I know it's a great time of the year. It's an exciting time of the year. It can also be sort of a stressful time of the year. So we're going to make sure that we cover some of those strategies and things that have worked really well in my studio and other studios that we've worked with. And then at the end, I know this is a great opportunity to ask questions. I'm so happy to answer anything today. If there's anything in the chat that you want to answer, please chime in. I would love for that to be super active today. So use it as much as you'd like. But we will also talk at the end about how to get some additional free help. So if more questions or more in-depth questions, I am happy to have that conversation with you. There is no sales call. There's no sales pitch. This is just really casual, like I said. So, put the credit card away, nothing to buy today. We're just going to hang out, answer some questions, talk about some of these studio growth essentials and the retention strategies. And even we talk about the free help that is also still not a sales call. So it's just another opportunity to share some information. If you guys follow me on social media, that's something I really enjoy doing, is just chatting about our studios. This is my favorite thing to talk about. So I'm really glad that you guys are here. Awesome. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I think it's Nada. Thank you so much for saying hello in Serbia. Oh my goodness. I think you win the award for furthest away today, which is awesome. Oh my goodness. But a degree in opera in Kiev and now setting up your vocal studio, which is great. I've actually worked at a studio in Serbia before. Fun fact. I feel like that's very random, but I'm excited to talk to you also today. If there's any questions I can answer. I know things are a little bit different. I know I'm going to talk about some stuff more stateside. Obviously, there's a lot of different business setup there. So if you have more questions, we can always talk about that individually too. Happy to help. Yeah, her name, actually, there's an interview on our website. Her name is Tina, and you can find that one. Tina and I worked together, I think a little over 2 years ago. So yeah, anyway, super fun. All right, quickly before we jump in, I know I talked about the studio growth and the retention. I want to make sure that I'm covering more information that you guys are excited about today. So just drop in the chat really quick, either the word growth or retention, so I know where to focus more of our time and attention and energy. I'm going to try to get to both thoroughly as much as possible, but it's whatever you guys want to focus on today. So I know Alex, Lena, Hazel are all saying growth. Right now that's winning. If you have different thoughts, let me know so that I can spend a little bit more time there. We are going to cover both. I've got a ton of information prepared for you guys on both sides, so not a big deal. Right now, growth is the overwhelming majority though, which is awesome. We're going to start there. Mark retention, awesome. Okay, we're definitely going to get to both. And I want to say too, summer is a really good time to grow a studio. And I know that feels a little counterintuitive, but students are looking for activities. They're looking for programming. Families are trying to find new activities for their students to prepare for fall. So this is a great time to do some growing, and we will definitely dive into that a little bit more too. Awesome. Okay, studio growth essentials. My thesis on this, what I think that every single studio needs in order to thrive, is a profitable lesson package, a predictable source of students, and a repeatable enrollment process. We're going to go into a lot of details on those things in a second, but I want to put a little disclaimer on this conversation that success for your studio, or what thriving means to you, or what full is in your schedule, is going to be completely different studio to studio. There's a lot of different factors here. Your schedule might be one. Not everyone just teaches full time and as their sole source of revenue and income. Obviously, a lot of us are performing. We might have other jobs outside of teaching and performance, or even outside of music. This is something that varies widely. So when we talk about having a full studio, I want you to think of your definition of full. It doesn't have to be my definition, which, like I said, was that 26 hours a week. It's not what I do now. Obviously, I have a few other things on my plate right now, so I don't teach quite full time anymore. But it also is important that when we talk about the thriving and full studio, we're taking into account differences in the instrumentation. For example, it's really common for woodwind, brass, string, percussion, and piano to sit closer to 20 to 25 hours a week as a full-time, teaching schedule and revenue goal for them. It's a lot more common for a voice instructor, for example, to sit closer to 15 to 18 hours a week. And a lot of that is fatigue. Like, there's just only so much that you can do. So it's okay if that varies, whatever your goals are. That's something that on the strategy sessions too, we do a lot, is just do the math for you and what would that number of hours look like, depending on the revenue goals that you have and how we can make that happen. So it's a wide array of success and definitions here. But like I said, summer's a great time for us to build a studio. So it's also a great time to shape your ideal schedule. If you want to no longer teach on Fridays, summer is a good time to kind of shuffle everything around and prepare students for that too. So we've got a lot of options and opportunities here. We'll start with the profitable lesson package first. And when I say package, I don't necessarily mean like a buy 10 lessons, get a slight discount kind of a package. In my mind, I'm thinking two different packages. Your hourly rate primarily is a package because it doesn't just include the time that we're actually spending with students in the lessons. There's a lot of other things that go into teaching a student. It's all the admin time. It's the time that you're spending on marketing and trying to add students to the studio. It's time that you're spending on researching material, researching repertoire for them, answering emails, communicating with families, planning recitals. There's so many things that go into that hourly rate. We want to make sure it's all accounted for and you're compensated for all of it. So right now in the US, the industry standard for lessons is around $1 per minute. So if you're teaching an hour-long lesson, it's about $60, 45 for 45 minutes, $30 for 30 minutes. But it's also really common, depending on where you live, your education experience, additional value and demand for that to increase. I know I put this big long list on here. I would say the most important factor, number one, in your rate beyond that $1 a minute standard is going to be cost of living. If you live in a more expensive area, it's only more expensive for you to live there and therefore provide your service, but also the market has a higher tolerance. So the rates in those areas will be higher to accommodate higher cost of living needs, but it will also be higher because the market will bear that. So when we look at average cost of living, this is one where I'm happy to give more specific examples. If you guys are looking for some advice on your rates, we can definitely have that conversation. I'm happy to dive into some of those numbers. But when we talk about average cost of living, it's helpful to look at median home price as a way to kind of figure out what that cost of living adjustment can look like. We can certainly use some examples too. If anyone wants to be the example, feel free to let me know in the chat and I can give you guys a quick rundown of what that looks like. Demand is probably the second one that's the most impactful. If your studio is full, it's a great time to raise your rates because you've got, a full studio, hopefully a little bit of a wait list. You've got some cushion there. And obviously students want to be working with you. So demand can certainly drive the rates up higher. And then education experience, this is going to help us get to that baseline dollar per minute. So when I say like industry standard, I'm kind of assuming that everyone has either a 4-year degree in music, whether it's performance or education or something along those lines, or equivalent experience. You do not have to have a degree in music to teach. And honestly, in a lot of disciplines and a lot of genres, there just aren't degree programs for those things. So even jazz studies is a newer degree program in the US, and it's not something that outside of the US is nearly as popular or prevalent right now. So it might not mean that you have a degree, but you might have been teaching for a long time or have a significant performance background and maybe have taken students on the side. So if you feel like you have experience and you are confident in your teaching on some level, then $1 a minute is probably a great place to start. Obviously, we just increase from there. If you're in a cost of living area that's lower than the US average, it might drive tuition down a little bit, but I'll be honest, it's pretty rare if I'm talking to someone in the US that we actually price anyone below that $1 a minute. So if you are on the fence or if you would, think that maybe there's a price increase coming your way, I would definitely look at doing that come fall. When we talk about the summer retention and summer attrition, summer is not always a great time to make big changes, especially to current students. The other part of the package is your tuition payment. If you follow me on social media, you know that I am very passionate about monthly flat rate tuition. I listed a few other options here. We can do a per lesson weekly payment where either they're giving you cash or check at a lesson, or you can use a program like Funds, for example, that will automatically pull funds from the student at the end of each lesson. It's a helpful thing. It's a great option and a great tool, but it's not something that is super consistent when we're trying to look for stability and predictability in our income. Kind of hit or miss, not ideal. We can also look at proactive monthly or retroactive monthly payment, meaning the beginning or the end of the month for the lessons that are happening in that month. Between the two of these, I would pick proactive every time by having students prepay. You're incentivizing them to actually attend their lessons, but also it's just a little bit easier for us to enforce any attendance policies or cancellation policies we have to make sure that you're getting paid for the time that you're reserving. We can also do semester or annual payment, big batches of payment up front. It depends on the students that you're working with. This does not always work for everyone's budget. Honestly, the reason that I tend to stay away from this is because it's harder for the teachers planning. When you've got a big chunk of money, but then you're not going to get paid again for 4 months, I think for a lot of people that can cause early in our financial growth, it can cause some hiccups. So just be aware of that. Like, I know it's really helpful. We've got them locked in for the semester, but it also can, maybe cause some conflict later on if they want to leave, or it might mean that we've got students that turn over a lot at the semester. And so it's kind of a weird in between where we've got some stability because they've paid up front, but then also when that term ends, we don't know if they're continuing, even if we ask, it's kind of up in the air until we get the next tuition for the next term again. So again, it can cause a little bit of anxiety, I think, for a lot of teachers to be in that holding pattern, in addition to the fact that we have to plan ahead. So the reason I like monthly flat rate is that it looks at your entire calendar year and it averages out that total annual tuition into 12 equal monthly installments. And then you can put people on auto pay. I'm a massive fan of automatic payment. I personally use Duet Partner, which is a studio management software, to manage this, and that pairs with Stripe. If you guys are using Venmo, especially the friends and family on Venmo or friends and family on PayPal, or if you're using Zelle, I'd be very cautious. Make sure that you're actually following the terms of service. You do have to be paying the transaction fees for that. And it's something that both the card processors and the US government are actually cracking down on right now. If you're outside the US, Stripe can still work in some countries. Obviously, check and cash are always still a really good option if you want to just accept payment off of that subscription. You could also look at things like Wise. Your PayPal, again, is always a really good option. There's definitely some flexibility here in the payment processing, but I would make sure that you're using a business payment processor and following the terms of service to avoid any disruptions, any hiccups, any breach of the terms of service too. Any questions on the profitable lesson package before I keep going? Or did anyone want to be a guinea pig for pricing? I'm happy to have that conversation. Going once, going twice. For virtual, great question, Leanna. So if you're looking at a virtual lesson studio and all of your lessons are going to be online, I would definitely do the monthly flat rate, so that you got everyone on subscription. You can't take check or cash in this case, so it's really nice to have that. It also helps to enforce everything. When we're looking at the pricing, though, it really depends on where you live and where the students live that you're trying to target. So it's really common in the studios that we've seen that are virtual exclusively to either price based on their local, and I know right now you guys are not local. I know you're actually traveling a lot, just like Anna is. You guys are kind of on the road. So it might not be ideal to price in your local area, but that is always an option. The other thing that I've seen people do is, because virtual lessons are always going to be more popular in larger cities, students are looking to avoid traffic. They don't want to have to drive to another lesson. Maybe it's not just a parent that's driving them. If we're looking at New York and LA, we do tend to have a lot of nannies getting students to activities or coordinating activities and schedules. When we're dealing with those types of situations, we want to be charging the premium for that area. So not just charging based on where you live, but if most of your students are going to be in New York, or if you want to target that area for your marketing and for your growth, then I would be looking at pricing according to New York prices, which, if you take New York or LA, for example, for a piano lesson, a lot of the time we're looking somewhere between $85 up to about $120 an hour as a baseline. If it's a high demand studio, if we're working with more advanced students or working more with professionals, then we can start to push into like that $150 to $200 an hour range too. So there is a lot of spread here in the hourly rates. I know that sometimes it can make it really tempting to just like only go virtual in some of those areas too, but make sure that if we're offering lessons, again, at $150 an hour online only, we're working with the right target demographic. And also we've got a really solid setup for online lessons. So sometimes that additional value piece is kind of what drives that more. I hope that makes sense. But Leanna, for you, I'd probably end up pricing this, just knowing your background and your education, I'd probably end up pricing somewhere between $75 to $80 an hour to start. Awesome. Alex will be the guinea pig. I love it. Thank you. So Alex, let me just scroll back here really quickly. Okay, we are in Winnipeg. Give me 1 second. I'm actually going to look at a different screen really quickly so I can run a small search here. Okay. So like I said, we're going to use median home price as a way to evaluate cost of living in an area. And the reason that we do this is it's just really fast data. If you look at cost of living adjustments or even inflation adjustments that are coming from a government body, they tend to be a little bit on the slower side, and it's retroactive. They're looking back at the last quarter of the year. They're not looking at this month, what's happening today in real time. So it's helpful to use median home price because we've got places like Zillow or Redfin and all these, websites that are aggregating home price data and home sale price data in real time, which is really, really helpful. So let's look at Winnipeg. Okay. I would also be careful of looking at like newspaper articles and things. I would definitely be looking at home listing sites again, because they are getting faster data. In Winnipeg, I'm seeing an average home price. Ooh, it's kind of all over the place. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of things in like the 350 to 500,000 Canadian range. It just depends. There's a lot of different reports depending on what type of home it is, which of course makes total sense. But let's average this out around like 400 to 450,000. The Canadian median home price that we're looking at right now by comparison is around that, like, again, pretty wide average. And obviously we're looking at a very large country. So I know the median's always gonna be a little off, but probably around at places like 550 to 600,000 is what I would say. So honestly, we're really close because Winnipeg is kind of pushing up into that range, or it's just slightly under. I definitely think we can do the $1 per minute Canadian. If you want to teach students in the US, I would switch that all to $1 US. So I would definitely make sure that you are charging in that currency. If you're going to teach students virtual in the United States, and I'm not sure if that's something you're interested in, but I would charge in US dollars because the conversion is going to be in your favor and students are expecting that. So I would definitely get a higher rate there. If it's all local students, I'd be looking at that $1 per minute. Again, same exact calculation that we talked about last time. But because it's trending just a little bit lower, I would also make sure that we're including some kind of additional value. An additional value could be recitals and events, it could be studio classes or master classes. It could be, for example, my own studio, I do asynchronous lessons with my students, especially around audition time, where they can send me a video recording and I will give them feedback in between their lessons. So we can do other things like that to kind of soup up the offer a little bit and make it look really, really nice. And also that additional value just helps to increase the demand there. So if you are a newer studio, then I would probably be looking at that $1 a minute. If we have additional demand, if the studio is full and you have a wait list, then I would also start to look at increasing that. And normally in an average year, we increase somewhere between 8 to 12%, no more than 15% in a single increase. I hope that helps. If you have follow-up questions, Alex, just let me know. All right, predictable source of students. And we're talking about growth. I know this is one of the big ones that everyone is excited about and is really curious in. So we'll spend some good time here. I want to compare two different categories of actions that we can take in our marketing efforts. And so I'm going to label one kind of the glass of water. These are things that they can have really fast success, but we have to constantly be refilling it. And then we've got the well, which is something that we can, dig once and then keep pulling from it ongoing indefinitely. The glass of water, this is going to be things like matchmaking agencies. So think about things like outschool.com, takelessons.com, Thumbtack and Bark are kind of similar processes. When we look at Outschool or Take Lessons, a lot of times, or even lessons.com, they're going to take a portion out of your tuition. So if you set your rate at $60 an hour, they're going to take 30% out of that as their cut for finding the students and hosting the lessons and doing the marketing for you. Candidly, I think that's too high. I know there's some newer programs like Forte Connect Lessons is trying to drop that a little bit. I think they're closer to 25%. My theory on this is, why would I pay out 25% when I can just do a little extra work up front and get all of those students myself? And then I don't have to pay any percentage out. I get 100% of it. So that's definitely my preference. And when we're looking at a profitable studio, our expenses, what we're trying to aim for is to keep all of our expenses below 20%. So that includes if you're renting a studio space, if you've got subscriptions, we really want to stay in that 20 to 25% range. So if we're paying out 30%, and then we also have to have equipment, and we also have to have music, and maybe we also have to have a space, it's really eating into our bottom line. Thumbtack and Bark are a little bit different. They don't take a cut. They actually charge you to talk to a potential student. And this is something I think during the pandemic, all these were thriving a lot more. People were taking more online lessons. But now there's this mindset that we're hearing from a lot of students that that was their COVID thing. That's what they did in 2020. They don't necessarily use those things now, or they don't even think to use them as much now. So we can find students directly. That's totally possible. And I would encourage you to try to go that route. And especially when we're talking about Thumbtack or Bark, where you have to pay to talk to a lead, we don't even know if they are still looking. They might have already found a teacher and just not updated their profile. It's also possible on some of these sites that there's scammers, like there's other negative things that can come with this. And I would hate to see you waste money. So if these are working for you, awesome. If you're not using them right now, I think there's other places that we can put our time and energy and investment to have a lot more success ongoing. Paid advertising is another one of those categories. I will make my stance here abundantly clear. I'm staunchly against paid advertising, especially for an individual studio owner. If you are a multi-teacher studio owner, meaning you've hired other people, you have a larger studio, paid advertising seasonally absolutely can make sense. A well-placed Google ad for fall enrollment, for example, or for a specific summer camp that you're running can be helpful. But again, if you didn't go to school for marketing, the technical writing and the experimentation on this, it adds up. You're experimenting with your money. You're spending money to see what works. In good advertising, we're running what we call A/B testing, meaning you might run two versions of the same ad with one tiny little tweak. And we're putting money behind those things to see what people react to the best. This takes time, it takes energy, and it takes financial investment, which again is not ideal for someone that's just starting or has a smaller studio. And if you're only looking for maybe that 25 hours a week of teaching, it's not the first place that I would be going. I put on here for paid advertising, Google ads, Facebook ads, it's gonna be print ads, YouTube ads, Google Maps pack listings and paid boosting there. It could be billboards if you really wanted it to be, but I would in general hit pause on those things. What I would keep from this list is social media. So I put on here Facebook groups, Nextdoor, and then Instagram and TikTok, which I think is really, really helpful. When we look at Facebook groups, if you are teaching locally, I'd be looking for local groups in your area. Same thing with Nextdoor. If you're not familiar with Nextdoor, I know this is available in the US and Canada for our European friends or friends abroad. It's not as prevalent, and I don't think it's operating, for example, in Serbia right now. I'm so sorry. But Nextdoor is cool because it just draws a little radius around your house, and only people in that bubble can see what you're posting, and you can only see posts from that area too. When we're talking about Facebook groups and Nextdoor for local promotion, we can expand Facebook groups beyond your local area, but most of these places are going to ask, or most of these groups rather are going to ask, do you live here? And obviously we don't want to be weird or unethical and lying in those responses. So giving, honest answers is really helpful. Whatever you're posting, make sure it is student-centered copy. The biggest misstep that I see here is that teachers will start posting in social media, like in Facebook groups, and they're only talking about themselves, where they got their degree, what their background is, who their teachers were, the successes that they've created for their students. That's unfortunately just not what students are buying. And I think this is a big misconception that a lot of us have in marketing. We're not selling ourselves. It's not an audition. It's not like our performance career. What people are choosing to buy in lessons is the experience of working with you. What does it feel like to be a student? What does it feel like to be in lessons with you? Is the teacher fun? Are they engaging? Is it exciting to come to lessons every week? Are they supportive and encouraging? So a great way to do that is to frame your post copy around what your students tend to say about you, and also feature testimonials. That's always a really great tip there. I like Instagram and TikTok. I think if I was going to pick one to spend more time and energy in, just seeing what we're seeing in our business, I'm actually a really big fan of TikTok for social media growth and organic marketing. If you're not into using TikTok or Instagram or creating short form video, please don't feel like you have to start that right now. It's a great thing to do kind of down the line. It does take a lot of repetitive effort and energy. If you're passionate about it, awesome. And if you're not, also awesome. That is totally fine. The well would be mutually beneficial relationships with key people in your community. And when we talk about mutually beneficial relationships, what I mean is that we're not emailing school music teachers or band directors and saying, do you have students that are interested in lessons? Those cold emails go unanswered. And I'm sure you've all experienced this. If you have, please let me know in the chat. By the way, I do see some questions about online lessons. If we have time, we can certainly come to that one today. It's not totally part of the focus right now, but if we have time at the end, I will totally circle back to online lesson tips. But yes, a lot of us have emailed school music teachers to little to no avail. It's pretty rare that we get some responses there. What does help is building a mutually beneficial relationship where we're not just coming in and asking for help or asking for favors, but we're offering help and we're offering support first. So this might be school music programs, band, orchestra, choir, general music. It might be homeschool co-ops and networks in your local area. This could also be, Girl Scouts and Boy Scout troops, church music programs, performing arts and visual arts organizations, think like dance studios, art classes, local theater groups, for example. This also can be other local musicians and private instructors. When we talk about the mutual relationship, when I approach any of these people, it's not, I need help, or please give me students, or do you have anyone that might be interested in working with me? My first question always is, what do you need? How can I help you? What would support your program right now? And when we're looking at summer, I know we're kind of cutting it close on the end of the school year for a lot of us, but now is a great time to be establishing these relationships because the response rate actually is higher right now. It's a stressful time of the year for a lot of teachers. I know Leanna used to work, for example, in the school system, so I'm sure she can attest to this, but it is a really wild time of the year. We've got last minute recitals, end of the year recitals, we've got grading, we're trying to get through everything. Our students are just checked out a lot of the time by the time we get to mid-May. So for a lot of these teachers, they are looking for other resources. They are looking for more engaging material and instruction. You might be able to go in and be a guest instructor if that's helpful. You might be able to talk about some summer programming that you're offering that could help retain information in the students' minds over the summer and help them apply it in a different way. We might have, intro classes or other things that we can offer too. So make sure we're giving some ideas, but also asking, what do they need? What would help them be successful? We're still not going to have everyone respond. Even everyone on this list, they have their own agendas. We're talking about a lot of the homeschool co-ops or scout troops, for example, they're volunteers. We are not going to get even close to 100% response rate, but we are going to increase the responses that we get when we approach it from this very servant leadership. How can I help? How can I support your program kind of attitude? Any questions on that, on the social media stuff, on the building these relationships? Happy to chime in there too. Going once, going twice. Otherwise, we'll keep moving for now. Okay, I just got a DM asking about those emails. And sorry, give me 1 second. What? Got it. What do you offer in the emails? Okay, so when I offer a list, I'm thinking about things that maybe I could teach in front of an entire group. So like practice techniques, for example, can be a great one. I've done like intro to songwriting classes, which can be so easy. Even if you're not a songwriter, if you go into a general elementary program, use the C5 finger scale. Every student picks a note, C, D, E, F, or G. Every student gets to pick then a quarter note or a half note to assign to those letters. We talk about 4/4. We group them into measures. Then we can talk about tonic and dominant and how we pick. Is it more 1-3-5 or 2-4-5 in this measure? Harmonize it, and then if you got time, like write some silly words about what they wrote, or rather what they ate for lunch or something like that, or things they're doing in math class. It can be really interactive and really fun. It does not have to be anything serious and lecture style. And honestly, the students don't want to usually sit through that anyway. They'd rather be doing something new and exciting. So any kind of application type presentation that you can do for a school program or for a scout troop can be really helpful. On scout troops, by the way, the Girl Scouts in the US actually have a music badge at the junior level. That's another really good thing that you can explore. You could volunteer to come and teach that, which is really easy. The instructions are online. It's really not difficult at all. So there's some kind of easy things that we can do, some kind of, I don't know, I don't want to call them obvious, but there are some really obvious things that we can step in and do. But if you have more specialized knowledge or there's things you're really excited about talking or excited to talk to students about, offer those things. It does not have to be my list, or it doesn't have to be something that, you feel you are supposed to do. Feel free to toss another few ideas out, and teachers will always tell you too what works for them and what doesn't work for them. Oops. Sorry, guys, back up. There we go. All right, talk about a repeatable enrollment process next. And when we talk about our enrollment process, this is going to be the initial outreach. This would also be a kind of meet and greet, maybe with some interview and assessment. We want to make sure that the goals are aligned. We want to set expectations for lessons, and then also talk about commitment and policies. This enrollment process can look different depending on what your goals are for your studio and what stage you're at in your studio growth and development. So, for example, I always run a consultation with a new student. That consultation for me, by definition, has no playing involved. And again, if you weren't here at the beginning, I'm a clarinet teacher. I don't bring students in for a trial clarinet lesson. What I want to do instead is interview them. I want to make sure that this is actually a good fit, that I like the personality, that we do get to get along really well, that if there's parents involved, depending on the age of the student, that is a good fit, and that the mom and the dad or the guardian and I are going to have a good working relationship. And I also want to make sure I know what the student's goals are. We can get really particular and really specific in this interview about what we want to see in ideal students by really honing in on who we want to be working with the most. So think about the students that you're already working with and try to define some of the things that make them a fantastic student and make them someone that you feel really connected to. And when you talk about ideal students in my studio, as an example, I love working with students that are really high anxiety. And this might be high performance anxiety, this might be high general anxiety. So when I meet with a student for the first time, I want to ask them things like, what brings them joy in school, and what do they like a little bit less in school, or what are some things they don't find as much joy in, and why? So they're telling me that, as an example, maybe math class isn't something they enjoy as much. I usually follow that up by asking why. Why don't we enjoy math as much? And some of my students, when again, things I'm listening for as an ideal student, a lot of times they'll tell me, well, math just, it makes me really nervous. It's something I enjoy. There's a lot of pressure, and you have to do timed tests, and it's just kind of scary. I'm listening for language like that, where they're telling me that things make them a little cautious, a little nervous. And that language to me is signaling that we have some anxiety that we can work through. And I love using music as a way to work through that anxiety and help build some confidence in my students. That might not be your ideal student, though. Maybe you're looking for really advanced students or very serious and dedicated students. And we ask about their goals, why they want to be in lessons. They'll tell you that information. They'll share details about what they want to work on. So it's helpful to just ask those things. And I've always found in a consultation, I have more time to do that in depth than I would in a trial lesson, because even though, yes, it does matter how they play and if they're coachable, I can get a lot of that information out of the interview, or I can even have them submit a recording to me of them playing in advance, rather than spend that lesson time or that consultation time doing some sample teaching where now I'm giving my expertise and my time away for free. If you're a more established teacher, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you to be teaching for free on these initial trial lessons, because you already have a well of social proof. Your students have already written you testimonials by this point, or if they haven't, we should ask for them. Students that are coming to you know that they want to be working with you specifically because they've done their research. They know that you've got a thriving studio. They know that you've got these great testimonials. We should be interviewing them and make sure it's a mutual fit. We're not just taking anybody. In a trial lesson, this can absolutely have its place, especially for newer studios. So if you don't have a lot of student testimonials, if you don't have a lot of social proof yet, if you are still trying to build up that momentum and build up that demand, a free trial lesson can still be a really good option. Absolutely. But eventually we want to shift ourselves to the consultation. The other thing that I really like about the consultation is it's very flexible. You don't have to put students in the time slot that is open in your schedule, meaning if you don't have an opening, if we're looking at summer and you know you're going to have some spots come June or July, but right now you don't, I'm not trying to fit them in those after school hours right now. I can still have the interview through Zoom or on a phone call at a different time, or even in the daytime hours. We've got a lot of flexibility there. So I also like that aspect of the consultation, that we're not trying to do something in person in my studio, blocking off a half an hour in the middle of my teaching time. It's just a little bit easier for us to coordinate calendars at that point. And also, some teachers like to move things around. So if they have a really ideal student and they need to fit them in at a certain time in their schedule, they might ask other students to shift things around. So what your current openings are may not actually reflect the availability you could have. And the consultation gives us a little time to figure out what that might need and what those next steps might be for them. As a quick aside on the consultation, if you want to hear them play, if you want to do more of a trial, if you're not sure you want to work with them long-term, offer a trial month and have them pay for it. Have them pay for an entire month up front on your flat rate monthly tuition, do the full 3 to 4 lessons that are happening in that month. And then at the end, schedule a phone call and do a quick assessment of, do we want to continue? Do we not want to continue? And it's okay at that point for you as a teacher even to say no, refer them out if it's not a good fit for you. But I think the consultations allow us the opportunity to have that conversation rather than doing even a paid trial lesson where we've got this one lesson that was purchased. And now I think sometimes it creates a little bit more pressure from the student because they have bought your service, they've paid you already, they're expecting to continue. Whereas the consultation is a little bit easier to say no if it's not a good fit. If that doesn't make sense, please let me know. I'm happy to clarify a little bit too. All right. So the 3 things that we talked about in the Studio Growth Essentials as kind of a quick reminder and overview were the profitable lesson package, the predictable source of students, and the repeatable enrollment process. And what I want to do in the chat is something that I do with my own students all the time. I call this roses and thorns. I know this is a popular thing to do. I certainly did not think of it. But when we talk about roses and thorns, the rose would be something that you're proud of, something that's going well in your studio, something that you feel really confident in. And the thorn would be something that you'd like to see improvement in. So maybe it's something that doesn't quite exist in your studio, or if it does, we want to refine it and see some improvement. It can be these 3 things. Maybe it's something else. It doesn't have to be this list, but in the chat, let me know what your rose is and what your thorn is. Like I said, I use this with my students all the time. And we did this a lot in our summer planning, which we'll talk about in a second, in the summer retention strategies. But I flat out ask my students constantly what their rose and thorn is when they play through something, when we're talking about summer goals and their summer projects. And it's really interesting to hear what they come up with. It helps to build a lot of self-awareness. And I like this language because I'm not ever asking my students, what are your strengths and your weaknesses, which I think puts more of a negative spin on it. When we think about an actual rose flower, we have this beautiful flower and this nice, beautiful stem with the gorgeous petals on top of it. And the thorns are just those tiny little annoyances on the stem. They're not making the flower ugly. It's not a weakness. It's not a negative thing on the flower. It's just kind of an annoyance or a little hindrance. So I like to use rose and thorns because I think it just paints this really positive picture in our students' heads. And I know when I was growing up, the things that your teachers tell you you're good at versus the things you need to work on, or the things that you're bad at or not as good at, sometimes that can stick in your head in a really negative way. And this is a different kind of phrasing and framing that I like for my students, where they're a little bit more in control and there's more self-awareness there. Awesome. Okay. Leanna, thank you. And like I said, if you guys are listening right now, let me know what your roses and thorns are from this right now. Leanna said lessons is the rose. So the curriculum is really solid, feeling like lessons are going really well. And thorn is how to get students, that predictable source of students. And then once we retain them, but getting them is hard. This is really common in the marketing. And if we can establish some of these relationships, which, Leanna, you've worked in the school system previously, so you have a lot of these connections. Let's see if we can create some resources, which I know this is totally in your wheelhouse. If you're trying to teach online, let's see if we can create some resources to share with your colleagues, whether they're colleagues we already know or colleagues that we're meeting, and things that they can use in their classroom, maybe even a little bit different than what you're currently selling. If you guys don't know Leanna's program, she has a really cool scarf dancing program and membership for general music education teachers at the elementary level. But something you could do here, Leanna, is create other resources as well that are not part of your program that could be a little introduction to maybe an instrument, or maybe it's a technique, or maybe some songwriting, something else that you like to do or you like to work on with your private students. And that could be a really great way to get into those classrooms without having to physically be there. Also, we can create some video resources they can use at the sub, or if they've got a really busy week, as another backup resource too. Alex was talking about his rose being a current student who's thriving and helping brand in the community a little bit more. So it sounds like you've got someone who's a big advocate for you, a big fan of yours out there speaking your existence in the community, which is awesome. And then a thorn is letting folks know that I'm open to teaching students now without feeling like I'm poaching from colleagues that I appreciate. This is a really interesting mindset, Alex, and thank you for sharing this. When we talk about competition in our area, it can cause some anxiety. As an example, when I moved back to Wisconsin, I settled right in between my 2 previous teachers. So one of my teachers is a little bit further west from where I'm located. One of my previous teachers is a little bit east from where I'm located. I'm not really in direct competition with either of them, um, but I'm smack dab in the middle. So what's interesting about this is when I moved back, I felt a little bit of this pressure because I like these people. I respect these people. They for my instructors, talk about imposter syndrome. It's so weird to be teaching in the same area as them or in a similar area to them. But what I found is their ideal student and my ideal student are very different. It's, again, my ideal student is someone that's really high anxiety. I don't necessarily want to take someone that's already really confident and is already at a really high level of playing. I'd rather work with someone who needs some support and encouragement. And that might be different than other teachers in my area. So also telling them who you want to work with, who do you serve, who are you most excited about can help with this a lot. And then the other thing is that communicating to other teachers that you're open for business is not letting them know that you're trying to poach their students, because you would never do that, especially if you're already concerned about it. What it does help, though, is to allow placement and sharing between all of you. So instead of approaching them and saying, I'm looking for students, do you have anyone on your wait list? Which I do feel is a little bit of a weird ask. Normally, what I'll say is, I'm looking for students. Are you also looking for students? Do you also have openings in your studio? And if so, what type of students do you like to work with more? That way, if a student reaches out to me that isn't a great fit, or if I can't fit them in my calendar, is it okay if I put them in contact with you and refer them your way? What you're kind of subconsciously planting is, of course, they can do the same thing for you. You can tell them who you're interested in working with. But also, that line of communication is then positive. We're not trying to interfere, compete with one another. We're working together. And I would also make sure that you're letting colleagues know that are not just your same instrument, that you are open for business. Because, for example, I'm a clarinet teacher now, but when I was teaching piano, I had a lot of piano students that were looking for other instruments or wanted to take voice lessons on the side. And by knowing other people in my area, I was able to help place them with the right fit. So it is a really great option to just be telling everyone in your community, even if it feels a little awkward at first, just be your genuine, nice self and ask how you can help them. Again, we're not asking for help, we're trying to offer it first. And then Lois said her roses, her students and their willingness to learn, which is awesome. It sounds like you have a lot of really good, ideal students in the studio. The thorn is sending invoices to parents. Lois, I'll tell you right now, that flat monthly rate subscription is going to change your entire life. I can't tell you the last time I actually had to collect money on an invoice. It's a huge, huge stress relief. And if you're not sure how to set that up, I'm happy to talk about this with you guys. But as I mentioned before, I use Duet Partner that partners with Stripe. You could also use something like My Music Staff or Teacher Zone or Fonz, but put everybody on a flat monthly rate subscription and just have that run automatically every month, and then have a cancellation notice period. So in your policy, just tell them how long they have to tell you in advance, or how many days in advance they have to tell you before you would cancel that subscription for the next month too. That way you're not chasing down invoices, you're not sending them out or asking for money. If we can separate the money from the music as much as possible, it yields a much more positive relationship, a much more friendly relationship. And we are not putting any pressure where, again, we're chasing down payment and invoices, or students, parents are only hearing from us in between lessons to bug them about payment. That always feels a little bit weird. So if we can get them on the subscription, then it just runs automatically. The money's in your bank account. We don't have to talk about it. And that's super helpful. Okay, we'll keep moving for now. I want to talk about some summer retention also. When we're talking about summer retention, there are three things I want to briefly cover today. And I know that growth was the place that we want to spend more time on today, so I'm going to move a little bit faster through the summer retention here. When we talk about summer retention, we need to align the expectations between the student, the parent, and the teacher. We need to have alternate solutions and some flexibility built in. And then we have to have supportive communication. So the very, very first thing that I want to share with you guys is that when a student comes to me and asks to pause lessons for the summer or asks to stop lessons, I ask why and how can I help? I don't just say, thanks for letting me know. Have a nice life, or have a good summer. See you later. My next question is, oh, what are you guys doing this summer? What's going on? Oh, why are we needing this accommodation? That way I have more information, and then I can make appropriate judgment on my next steps too. So in the chat quickly, so I, again, kind of know where to focus a little bit more of my time and attention on the summer retention. Tell me what causes the most stress in your business each summer. Is it students leaving? Is it summer planning and scheduling? Is it the invoices? What is usually the most stressful for you guys each summer? And if you don't have a lot of students right now and you're trying to grow the studio, and maybe this is a little bit new for you, tell me what you might be stressed about going into this summer, looking at, obviously school ends for most of us the next couple of weeks. So what is bothering you right now about your business heading into summer? Awesome. Okay. Balancing everyone's wild schedules. Hey, Sam, good to see you. And conflicts, including your own. Keep in mind too, you are going to have weeks off in the summer. So as we start to talk about other summer conflicts with your students, there might be weeks that align. So if you have your summer schedule figured out, some of this kind of can take care of itself. But when you're trying to move things around for the summer and get everyone scheduled, Google Forms is really helpful. Create some resources for your students to share with you what their schedule is, not only for their day-to-day schedule of when their weekly lesson is going to be, but also when they're going to be gone. Lois is talking about enjoying teaching for the summer, but you'd like to have some me time. I always change my lesson schedule in the summer. So when I was teaching 26 hours a week, that was 5 days a week in the school year. I always shrunk that down to 3. I would teach Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday only. That way I had a 4-day weekend, which was amazing. But also Mondays and Fridays are when all my students are starting to travel for the weekends anyway. There were a ton of cancellations, a lot of reschedules. So if you can narrow it down a little bit, that might help. Alex, requesting flexibility and potentially going to digital for in-person students. Yeah, absolutely. If you can move some students virtual for the summer, if that's going to accommodate some of their scheduling requests, that's a great option. And then also Mark saying pausing lessons, which it's a common request. I know it really eats into our revenue, and we have to plan a little bit more on the finances, which can be really stressful heading into summer. I've got some solutions for this too. So we'll jump right into that, Mark. Let's talk about aligning expectations first. I think one of the biggest missteps that studios tend to make is that they treat summer as inherently different. It's a different part of the year. It's not the same. It's optional. Do you want to continue lessons over the summer is usually the question we start asking people around this time. And that leaves the door wide open to attrition or students leaving. When summer lessons are just treated as a continuation, students just continue. They aren't really aware that it's an option. So if we can have things like a flat monthly rate tuition, for example, that everything just continues as normal. We just, again, keep the subscription going. There aren't any changes. We're not doing like alternate summer packages or anything. We're removing the optional part of it, and it's just treated as a normal thing that we do. We all just take lessons over the summer. That's how the studio operates, and everyone will just go along with that. I also recommend allowing students input in their student goals and their summer goals. And if we can set these early, about 2 to 6 weeks before the end of the school year, it really helps to set us up for success come summer. If you haven't had these conversations yet, I would start having them this week and next week with your students. I also let all of my families know, especially when they do ask to pause lessons, that any student enrolled over the summer is going to receive priority for scheduling in the fall. So if they want to maintain their lesson time for fall, the only way that I can guarantee that is that they do need to be involved in the summer term. If they're going to take summer off, I can't promise that I'm even going to have a spot for them at all come fall, because I'm going to have to fill that spot, and I'm going to keep marketing my studio. I'm going to be adding other students from my wait list or through my marketing efforts. A lot of the common conflicts from our students are going to be, it's obviously very unique to each situation, but it's burnout. Students just feel exhausted at the end of the year. Sometimes they want a break. It can be summer coursework if they're taking, for example, summer class, or if they're doing summer school. It's also a common time for adult students to get in classes towards a master's program or a secondary degree. A lot of my adult students historically over the summer have taken classes, and that can cause some extra stress because they're still working and they're trying to have fun outside in the summer, and they're trying to balance that coursework. We might have family travel. We might be at camps, especially for our younger students. They're just gone for whole weeks at a time. Sometimes it's parent and guardian availability, that the students are at a camp all day, and then in the evenings, depending on your schedule from those parents and guardians, they might not be available during the daytime hours to bring students to lessons if you want to teach then. And in the evenings, they might have other conflicts. That parent or guardian could be taking summer coursework. They could have a secondary job. It's common a lot in the summer for people to work or volunteer with more programs in the summer, or be gone at adult softball leagues or doing other activities that are not normal for the school year. And as a result, their availability can change. And then we just have general schedule changes, especially if you're hosting lessons in a school system. This is rare, but it does happen. I see a lot of teachers that will host their private lessons, especially this is common like states like Texas, for example. The students actually have their private lessons happen during the school day in the school. When the school year ends, they usually don't expect to continue over the summer because there's no school. So we can have some common issues there as well. So we want to have alternate solutions. When we're talking about a pause for the summer or some of these summer conflicts, if you can have a few options already predetermined in the back of your mind, then we can help support students in continuing their lessons and ease the stress that they may have around scheduling. A really common reason that people ask to pause for lessons is because they think it is what's best for you and for the relationship. They know that they've got some travel coming up, that students might be at camp for a week or two. They just look at the summer and say, I don't want to be a nuisance. I don't want to cancel too many lessons and bother Kelly or bother Mark. So I'm just going to ask to stop. That's what makes the most sense. It's better for everyone. But if we know our schedule and some of these options, sometimes we can work around them because we can have those options available and give them some supportive choices and alternate solutions here. So it's important to know, like I said, your own studio schedule, because a lot of the conflicts are going to happen around common time off. Summer holidays, for example, in the US, the 4th of July is a really common week to take off. If you're going to take a vacation, maybe we look at aligning your vacation with 4th of July so that you're not trying, especially this year, it's like smack dab in the middle of a week. You're going to have students gone. That might be a great time for you to take your vacation and not have to deal with makeup lessons. It also is helpful if we know some of those things a little bit more in advance. It's not totally necessary, but that way, if a student comes to you and says, we're going to be gone for 3 weeks, but one of them aligns with your own studio closure and your own studio calendar, then now we only have 2 makeup lessons that we actually have to worry about, and that can alleviate some stress too. A couple ideas and solutions here. I'm going to move through these pretty quickly. We can set our summer goals early and set those expectations early. So talk to your students early, like again, right now in the school year, and talk about what they're going to do this summer. I like to set fun projects or focuses for the summer. A lot of my students are working on composition projects, or they want to work on, I had a student come to me last night and say, I'd really like to try some jazz, which is not totally in my wheelhouse, but doggone it, we're going to give it a shot this summer because she was really excited about it. When we have a fun project in mind, they are more excited to continue their lessons too. I also extend the period for rescheduled lessons. So normally in my studio policy, you have to use a makeup lesson within 30 days. I will be way more flexible on that in the summer. If they're going to be gone for 2 weeks in July, we could make one of those up in June. We could make one of those up in August. If we really can't make it work, I will even put one of those into September if I have to, just to make sure that they communicated in advance. I can work around their calendar and be supportive so they don't feel like they have to take that time off. You can also provide virtual lessons as an option, especially if travel is a potential conflict. Works better for some instruments than others, but if we do have some schedule conflict, if we're trying to squeeze lessons in somewhere, or if we've got some young students that it's really hard to get them in based on their schedule, or if it's really hard to get them to leave their friend's house or leave the pool in the backyard in the summer, sometimes a virtual lesson is a really good kind of in the between option. You could also look at asynchronous lessons for a really busy student. Again, they could have a video that they send to you and kind of get feedback either in another video or in text-based feedback. Just something to kind of replace that lesson slot too if they want to continue, but scheduling over the summer is a headache. If you had students that you were teaching in the school system, you could always look at traveling to them for summer, or even if we've got some schedule conflicts, if you've got a morning where you'd be game to do some driving, if the parent travel or student ability to get to you is what's holding them back, if a virtual lesson is an ideal, you could look at traveling to them for the summer and then charge more money because you're offering more value in that service. We also can look at an alternate time of day. So a lot of my students will move into morning times in the summer so that their afternoons are more free because they want to go do stuff in the afternoon. And if mom and dad work in the mornings, then they want to go do stuff in the evenings. It does help to move things to the daytime hours if that works well for them. So sometimes just a shift there can really help things stay on track. You could also look at an a la carte monthly subscription, meaning maybe they're paying for only 2 lessons per month as opposed to the flat rate where they're getting 4 or 5 per month. That way they can schedule when it's convenient for them. They're not tied to a weekly lesson time. It's a little bit more flexible. We can also look at shorter lessons. If they're already in an hour lesson and maybe burnout is a concern or the scheduling is a concern, put them in a half an hour or 45-minute lesson if we have to, or divide some of those up into smaller time bits. We can pause lessons as we're going down. These are some of the ones that I don't like as much, but they are a good backup plan. We can provide a pause in lessons, maybe 2 to 4 weeks, but I would ask for a deposit for when they return so that we know they're taking 2 weeks off at the end of June, but July they're already paid for. We know they're coming back in July for the rest of the summer. We could also look at a summer package with fewer lessons. Again, this is a backup option. This is not my first choice, but if we know they're going to be gone a lot and there's 10 weeks of summer, I will have them pay for a package of 6, and then I'll give them a calendar link and they can go schedule when it's convenient for them. So we're not blocking off a weekly lesson time. You also could offer an alternate package or a camp program. So if they participate in your 1 week camp or 1 week online program, then maybe they can still hold their spot for fall without having to attend a weekly lesson. That's just another option that we have on the table. Or very worst case scenario, last resort, if they are adamant about taking the summer off or they're going to be gone the entire summer and we can't make it work, if they do want to hold their fall spot, I will have them prepay for either August or September, whenever school's going back into session. And that holds their spot. It's non-refundable. They cannot get that money back for any reason. But if they do prepay, then I know in September I'm going to hold the spot for them. So there's still someone involved. I've got that money in hand and I'm a little bit more comfortable doing that if we have to. And then finally, supportive communication. When someone asks to pause lessons, as I said, they usually are asking this because it's the best solution known to them at the time. They're trying to be respectful. They don't want to be a burden to you and request a lot of makeup lessons or have a lot of absences. But we know we have other options that they're not quite aware of yet. So all of the communication is around problem solving. I know it can be frustrating when they ask to stop lessons, but we want to ask why and how can I help? We also want to remind students in a friendly, supportive way that those enrolled for summer do get first priority for fall scheduling and enrollment. So I usually tell them, well, I can't guarantee a spot if it's open over the summer and you're not taking lessons over the summer, because someone else will likely be paying tuition for that time. We can look at some options to make sure that we can still hold the spot for you for fall because you'll have some enrollment and some engagement over the summer. Is that something you might be interested in doing? So some helpful phrases to use in this communication: when they tell you they want to pause, say, thank you for letting me know. What does your summer schedule look like? So again, we're kind of asking why, but in a nice way. I'm not saying, what do you mean you want the summer off? But what does your summer schedule look like is a really nice, way to get more information about their travel. It's conversational, it's not pushy. If they're asking about lesson scheduling, or if they're expressing that they might want to continue, but they just, again, don't want to be a burden, I'll say things like, I'm so happy to be flexible. I want to make this work for you. How can I help? When we also talk about that fall enrollment hold, I'll say things like, I would feel awful if there wasn't space for you in the schedule come fall. I really like working with you. If we could work around your travel and your schedule, would you be open to finding a solution for summer lessons? And then again, how can I help? Would you be interested in, or would it work well to try, are all really good, helpful, supportive phrases to make sure we're moving in the right direction and we're giving options that meet our students' needs. So kind of in summary today, when we're talking about the strategies for summer retention, when a student or a parent asks to pause lessons for summer, they're just not aware that other options exist, and they might still be open to discussing further. I would highly recommend not having this conversation over email and text. This is something I recommend in general when we come into some of the more difficult conversations, whether it be around tuition and payment or scheduling or conflicts in the studio at all. If it can be face-to-face or over the phone, so we can hear each other's inflection, we can work together on a solution a lot faster, it's very helpful. And I would start that call or that conversation by just asking for more details and allow them to fully share, say everything they want to say, resist the urge to jump in and try to jump into the solutions right away. And then ask for permission to start problem solving. Like, I have a few ideas. Is it okay if I share? That type of language is really helpful. And again, now we're not pushing them. We're not trying to sell them anything. We just want to help solve the problem. And we want to make sure that they're actually game for that conversation before we just jump into it. In my own experience, when a student asks to pause lessons, 50% of the time, they were planning on stopping lessons no matter what. They're probably not even going to come back in fall. They're just done with lessons. The end of the school year was their time. That's totally fine. It was just a convenient timing for them to pause. Not a big deal. If I ask if they want to explore other options, they'll say no, totally fine. When I say I can't hold your spot for fall, they'll say, not a big deal. No worries. We'll take our chances. That's a good student to let go. The other 50%, if I ask them to explore other opportunities, they will be thrilled. They will say, yes, we want to hold our spot for fall. We would hate to not be able to keep working with you. How can we make that happen? And then we can start to do that problem solving together. We don't want to push them. We want a mutually beneficial solution. So we're trying to find, again, this is all problem solving. All sales is problem solving. I just want to work with them as a team to make sure that we can make this happen efficiently and effectively. Okay, that was a lot of information really quickly. I know we went through that a lot faster than the other section. Is there anything that you guys are excited to try applying in your studio this summer? And I put a little summary here today too of the things that we've talked about. So aligning the expectations, some of those alternate solutions and providing some flexibility, and the supportive communication and how to have those those tricky conversations around summer. I know it can be a lot. If you guys have anything that was really helpful, let me know in the chat. Or if you have any follow-up questions on this, of course, please let me know. Happy to try to answer a couple of those. I know we're a little over the hour mark, so we're going to wrap up here in just a second. But if there is anything I can answer, please let me know. I know, Mark, you had said earlier that it was a mindset issue you thought for a lot of your students wanting to pause lessons. I think treating it more like the expectation and then doing some pre-planning right now will really help to retain them, because you'll put them in that mindset of course we continue. Lessons just happen over the summer. That's what's normal and natural, and that's what's expected. And then they have a plan and they know what they're working on too, so it's not ambiguous for them. It's a good jumping off point for a lot of these solutions. Leanna's Mommy and Me classes this summer. That's awesome. And you could even look at doing, Leanna, to help do some marketing for this, because I know summer scheduling can be hard with like ongoing group classes that are happening once a week. You also could explore doing like 1 day Mommy and Me little workshops or little intro classes also. And you could have an intro rate for that. Maybe it's a lower price point for those first couple classes if they want to come just do a pickup class. That way you are getting some buy-in. You know they're actually going to show up because they paid something for it. But also you can have a little bit of a mailing list built up, right? You're getting some interest and some excitement around that, especially for fall ongoing classes. But then you can also make sure that you're communicating with them and making sure it's a good fit for them long term as well. The intro classes are kind of fun. Mark's talking about new vocabulary. Absolutely. The pre-planning is going to help. And if you can just, have some of these backup plans, obviously you can watch this recording back to later, Mark, it'll get sent to you. So that full list of ideas, like prioritize them. In an ideal world, what would your top 2 options be? Your top 2 solutions be? And then what is your 1 or 2 like last resort backup options, like that non-refundable deposit or like a smaller package of summer lessons, for example. That way, when you go into those conversations, you have a plan. You're not shooting blind. But if at any point you don't know what to offer, it is also always totally fine to say, thank you for sharing. If it's okay, I'd like to take a day or 2 to think about this. Can I call you back? Today's Wednesday. Can I call you on Friday with some other ideas? And a lot of times people will say, absolutely, not a big deal. They're not going to push you for an answer right then and there. It's okay to buy yourself some time if you want to think about what the solution is too. Louis, I'm glad that this was helpful. That's awesome. This was a lot of information very fast, so I would watch the recording back. And then we're going to talk about how to get some help here in a second too. So as promised, this is not a sales call, and this next call is not a sales call either. But if you guys have questions, or as you're thinking about these things and it's all marinating, if anything comes up for you or you want some additional support, you can scan this QR code, and that's going to take you to a link for our free 1-hour strategy session. There's no cost. Again, like I said, there's no pitch on this call. This is going to be a time for us to align on what your studio needs, make some recommendations. We can walk through exact pricing plans for your area. We can talk through your monthly flat rate tuition. We can calculate all that on the call. We can talk about policies, whatever questions you have, whatever pain points you have in your studio. And then at the end, we will go through a personalized action plan for you to make sure that you're putting your time and attention in the right places. And if you guys have questions beyond that too, we can certainly keep following up. But this is only going to be open for the next 48 hours. I don't have a ton of capacity for this. So this is actually going to close on Friday. So as you're watching this recording back, make sure you jump on this really quickly. And if you have any issues with this, just let me know. But when you scan this code, it's going to take you to a series of questions to help me prepare for our call, so I know what we're talking about and what your studio might need. And then we'll do this 1-hour free call. Like I said, no pressure. There is no sales here. This is all just a fun meet and greet. Make sure we get all the answers that you're looking for, because I did dump a lot of information on you guys today. So go ahead and scan that. This will be in the recording. I will also send the information for this when we send the recording. So if for some reason you can't scan the QR code right now, we can definitely circle back on that, and it'll be in the follow-up emails too. Okay, final thing before we wrap up, we've got 2 minutes. Any other final questions that I can answer? Any other thoughts? Anything at all? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and call it for the day, and I'll see you guys on that 1-hour strategy session too. Is there anything else I can answer or help with today? For a group class, that initial first group class, if you're looking at trying to do a little intro session, I would either charge for what you are kind of picking as your hourly rates. Normally group classes are around 50% of your normal hourly rate per student. So you could use that pricing. You also could do a little discount on that. So normally people charge between $10 to $15 for that initial class. Okay. You're welcome, Alex. I'm glad this was helpful. If there's anything else that you guys need, like I said, scan that code. I'm so happy to help. And if there's anything that let's say you're looking at the booking and you can't find a time that works well for you, feel free to email me too. I'm so happy to give you guys some other options if my calendar isn't totally aligning with what you're looking at. But I do have that open through, I think into like the first half of June. So there's some flexibility there. Just let me know if you can't find a time that works for you guys. You're welcome, you guys. Thank you so much. This was really fun. I hope this was helpful. We may have tried to cram a little bit too much information into this call for an hour, which is totally fine. I hope it was a lot of good information for you guys, and I'm excited to hear how you apply it in your studios. And then I'll see some of you on these strategy sessions also. If you need any support in the meantime, you know how to find me, email, social media, and there's a ton of other information about everything we've talked about today on my TikTok and on my Instagram as well. So if you want more resources, go watch some videos. There's definitely plenty there. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. It was wonderful to see you. Wonderful to meet you. Talk to you soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, all.